Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of, thank you, Sippin' Ground Coffee. My name's Dan Painter and I'm going to be the host for today's topic. Our topic today is city water pressure booster pumps. So we're going to go through that here in a little bit, but a few things up front. If you like these videos that we're doing, and hopefully we're getting better at this as we go, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the bell. That way, if you hit that little bell, you'll get notifications every time we put one of these live broadcasts on. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, and if you haven't done this yet, make sure you go to our website and sign up for our email updates. That'll give you an idea of what all's going on up here at Flint and Walling. And the other thing, during the course of this broadcast, I am going to give you a code word, and if you take that code word and add it to a couple others that we give out during these broadcasts, you get 3 of them, put them together, email those in to marketing@flintandwalling.com, and you'll get credit for these sessions. And if you attend at least 3 of them, there's some kind of a reward. They still haven't told me what that's going to be, but there'll be some kind of a reward for you sitting in and attending these sessions.
There'll be selected giveaway items.
And you know, one thing I don't have with me right now is a presenter.
Yeah, it's right here.
Oh, it is? Okay, there we go. All right, so we're going to get started today. We're going to talk about city water pressure booster pumps, all right? And as we go through this, as you can see on the screen, we're going to talk about the system components. We're going to go through some of the, we're going to walk through an installation, just some of the features and performance of this product here. All right, city water pressure booster systems. The key word is city water. All right, this pump is not designed for wells or lakes or cisterns or anything like that. This pump is designed strictly for city water. And there's basically 2 applications that we're going to have for this pump. And those applications are as follows. One, on the left-hand side, if you want to boost pressure inside your home, these are great products to be able to do that with. This is a great pump to be able to do that with. You know, I've been into houses and they've got shower heads the size of a manhole cover, you know, and they're not happy with the amount of water or pressure that they're getting out of that. So, you know, a booster pump like this going into a house like that would increase that pressure significantly. The other application is irrigation, all right? So those are the 2 basic applications for this pump. That said, there are actually 2 models. One is a 1/2 horsepower and one is a 1 horsepower. It's an opinion, but in my opinion, that 1/2 horsepower is sold primarily to boost pressure inside homes, whereas the 1 horsepower pump, that's going to be designed to boost pressure on an irrigation system. To give you some idea of these overall size of these pumps, and of course I have one right up here on the table, as you can see, the footprint's pretty small, all right, about 9 inches tall, and you can see the length. You know, this would literally fit inside of a standard mailbox. It's a small footprint for the size of boost that you get, so it doesn't take up a lot of space, which is advantageous, all right? So let's look at some of the components that make up this water system. Am I speaking too fast? No? Oh, by the way, too, if there's any questions as we go through today's presentation, don't be bashful, don't be embarrassed. Go ahead and ask them. They'll throw those at me, and I'll try my best to get you an answer before we get off the line here today, all right? So when we look at system components, the first thing I want to draw your attention to is what we call our inlet and our outlet. The inlet is basically, if you're standing in front of the pump, the inlet's going to be on the left-hand side. The discharge or the outlet's going to come right out the top. These are both 1 inch, and they are fitted with stainless steel. You can see that there on the screen. Stainless steel 4-bolt flange to connect your piping up to the pump, right? So again, the suction's on this side, and the discharge comes right out the top. If you do notice on the suction side over here, you can't see it with this plug in here, but the one on the screen will show it. There's a fine mesh stainless steel screen that sits just inside that suction flange. You can see it up there on the screen. And that's there for good purpose. And I'm going to try to give you an idea of why that's there. Right behind it is what we call an internal flow switch. This is what turns this pump on and off. It's based off of water flow. So if you're using water at a rate of 0.7 gallons per minute or more, That's going to power this pump up, all right? And that flow switch you can see on the screen, it looks like a check valve. It's spring-loaded, so as water comes into this pump, it'll lift that, pop it up, that switch up, and power the pump on. And so therefore is the reason we have that screen on the suction side of this pump, because the last thing we would want to have happen is to get any type of debris or grit or particles that might get into that inlet and get underneath that little poppet and keep it from coming back down and turning the pump off. So we want to protect that area, and that's why that screen's there. Now that poppet I mentioned a minute ago, it's spring-loaded. It moves up and down, and as it moves up and down, it turns the pump on and off. But the other thing that it does is it also acts as an internal check valve. So it's very much designed like a check valve. And it, like I said, it sits just behind this inlet, this suction inlet you can see on the screen. So that's, again, why we want to protect that with the suction screen there, okay? All right, let's see, moving on. Moving on, all right? Pump housing, all right? Inside that pump housing are 3 stainless steel impellers. The other thing that's in that pump housing is a thermal sensor. Now I want to stop just for a second here, because city water pressure booster systems are a dime a dozen. They've been sold in this industry for the last 15 or 20 years. Part of the problem that they've had with these is when, if you get into a heat rise situation, if the pump's running dry, if the pump's deadheading, if it's pumping against a closed valve, you're going to generate a lot of heat. And that heat can get to the point where it'll actually boil the water, and when that happens, all your fittings are going to bust loose, and flooding probably is going to take place. The Flint and Walling city water boosters, and I'm not sure how many other brands out there do this, but I will tell you that every single one of ours that go out will have what's called a thermal sensor. I want to show you this thing, all right? This thermal sensor is going to sit right inside that pump body. So if you look at the inside of that pump body, about 4 o'clock, all right, you'll see that little round silver sensor sitting over there. Again, that's right where that heat is going to be generated inside of that pump body should we get into some type of a heat rise condition. And obviously the reason for that thermal sensor is to shut that pump down. It'll sense heat rise long before it becomes anything detrimental to this pump, and it's going to shut that pump down so it doesn't self-destruct. And so that's a good reason to have a thermal sensor in there. It's protection, just to keep us from overheating this pump. All right, let's move on. Up front is the pressure tank, right up front here. That's the pressure tank. Probably holds about as much water as this styrofoam coffee cup. However, in the applications for these city water boosters, that pressure tank functions just fine. The black cap that's on the front, I'm going to turn this here, so let's maybe see this a little bit. I'm going to angle this, I want to show you. So this black cap that's on the front of this tank has a air valve just below it, all right? Just an air valve right there, all right? So that's a place where you can either add air or remove air from this little pressure tank. Just like a conventional pressure tank is going to have an air charge to it, as it ships out, so does a city water booster. And I'm going to talk about that air charge here in a little bit. Maybe I'm going to talk about it right now, okay? So let's look at the pre-charged, in other words, the pre-charged air that's in this tank. If this is a 1/2 horsepower, which is that VPO5, that air pressure in that tank will leave our factory set at about 25 psi. If it's a 1 horsepower VP10, we're going to bump that up to 35 psi with an air valve or an air gauge. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and take that cap off and just check that air pressure. Make sure that it hasn't dropped or that there's not too much in there. But it's just a quick way to check that air pressure to make sure that that's where it needs to be. And again, I mentioned that air valve is just below that black cap that allows you access to that tank. Back in the back is the motor. One thing I'd say about this motor is that it's 115 volt only, okay? Now you can get it in a 1/2 horsepower, you can get it in a 1 horsepower, but it's going to be rated at 115 volt, period. It is also rated for continuous operation, meaning 24/7, 365. I've had some people that actually have taken this pump, and in lieu of boosting pressure in the house or an irrigation system, I've seen them use this pump for water features, if they've got fountains or waterfalls. Again, it's designed for continuous operation. The base is a 4-bolt pattern down there. It's a plastic base. There's a four bolt pattern down there, and I would highly recommend that once you install this pump that you do bolt it down to something and make it, stationary, because we don't want this thing as it's up and running migrating all over the place. All right, we want to hold it still in one place. And I want to mention something about this plastic base. When these pumps first came out, I don't know, several years back, they did not have 4-bolt flanges on the side. There were 2 bolts. And a lot of them out there, a lot of other brands out there today still only have a 2-bolt flange. And let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to have a contractor thread a nipple into that flange sometime, and they're going to put probably the biggest pipe wrench they can find, and they're going to crank that thing down because they don't want any leaks where they're doing their business. But the problem is they over-tighten. And if you're using Teflon tape, a lot of people will use Teflon tape to go around pipe threads. Listen, 1, maybe 2 revolutions. That's it. We don't need to make a mummy out of this thing, because when we do that, we thread it into that flange, something's going to break. Something's going to break. But then we went to this 4-bolt flange. Over-tightening was one problem, all right? Over-tightening was kind of a major problem. But we went to this 4-bolt flange. This pump was sitting down in our lab one day, and I had a 1-inch galvanized steel nipple. And we threaded that steel nipple right into the side inlet of this pump. It was bolted to the workbench. I went over. I had 3 pipe wrenches to choose from, and I chose the biggest one. That's what I kind of think a lot of us do that, right? I put that pipe wrench on that 1-inch nipple, and I was destined to bust that thing. I wanted to see how much pressure that thing's going to take, and I got on there, and I pushed, and I pushed, and I pushed. I never impacted that flange at all, but I did break the base. So that's how much pressure I put on that pump. It didn't impact the flange at all, and I snapped the base, all right? So anyway, bolt that thing down. On top, up here, are your electronics, and this is also where our onboard protection is going to be located, all right? What do you mean onboard protection? Well, this city water booster is designed so that if we get into any of these conditions on your screen, that dry run, these pumps are not designed to run dry, and if they do, they're going to generate heat. Deadhead, that's probably the most destructive thing that could ever happen to a pump. Essentially, what a deadhead means is that pump is pumping against a closed valve. I see this too often times in irrigation, where a valve's closed and the pump's coming on and it's trying to push water, but there's no place for the water to go. So what happens? It sits there and it churns that same water over and over and over again. And again, you'll get a heat rise, and that's called deadhead. Rapid cycling, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. That'll also generate heat. And although, if you don't have anything on this pump to protect it from that, therein lies a lot of problems, right? So, on the back side of this electronic enclosure is a label. I'm going to circle back on that label here in a little bit, but you can see there are going to be 3 indicator lights on that label. The top one's green, it's a power, followed by a red failure light, and a yellow, what would be called our on light, all right? Right at the top of the pump, between the flow switch and the discharge, is what's called an air relief plug, all right? I'm going to take this one out right there. When priming this pump, take this plug. You can either take it out or you can simply loosen it. But this is going to expedite priming this pump. This pump is the simplest pump that we have as far as priming goes, all right? As far as priming goes. All right, so that's what that plug's used is to assist in priming.
Give me 1 second.
All right, we'll get to the point where we'll invite. A good time for me to take a sip of this ground coffee.
I'll get it here.
We good then?
Yep.
There you go. There's a view of it. All right, it's right between that the flow switch and the discharge is where that air relief plug is located. All right, so let's talk about the installation. Now, listen, I'm going to point this installation out as it is in our installation manual, and it's also pointed out in virtually everybody else's installation manual, other brands. So I'm going to point this out as it should be installed. Again, you've got a 1-inch inlet and an outlet. All right. So you're going to bring that 1-inch from the city, and you're going to pipe that into the suction side of the booster pump, and then we're going to come out the discharge, and that's going to go either to the home or the irrigation system, all right? Now, let's talk about a couple things that are going to make this pump so much more easier to service, all right? One, having valves nearby. Having a valve on the inlet side and a valve on the discharge side makes it very, very easy if you want to pull this pump out for winterizing, if you need to pull this pump out to have maintenance or service provided, you got valves right there. Otherwise, if you don't have valves here, you got to go find a place to shut the water off, right? And too often times that's the main valve coming into, so you get to shut the water off to the entire house while you're taking this pump out. The other thing that is highly recommended is, and here's your code word for the day, by the way, unions, all right? Unions, write that down somewhere. Having unions on the inlet and the outlet of this pump, again, makes it so much easier to, to remove it, to be able to take it out for winterization. If you don't have unions and you don't have valves, you're going to end up cutting pipe, and then you're going to have to couple it back together, and then next year you're going to find another place on that pipe to cut it, and couple it back together. You know, a couple times like that, and it just doesn't look very professional up here with all the coupling. So unions and valves are highly, highly recommended. All right. Here's a few other things that are going to be recommended. One, put a bypass around the whole daggone thing, the whole thing, a bypass valve. Why? Well, if you ever need to take that pump out, you can close the inlet, close the outlet, take the unions, and open the bypass. Guess what? Customer still has water while the pump's being serviced or maintained, all right? So having a bypass around here. More importantly, perhaps, think about this. City water, and you lose power, all right? You have no power. What's that mean? Well, that means that pump's not going to run. And if you don't have a bypass around that pump, and you think you had low water pressure before you put this pump in, let me tell you something. After you've run that pump, after you've run that water through this pump, and this pump's not going to cooperate because it's got no power, the pressure coming out of it is going to be really low, all right, really low. Whereas if you had that bypass and you could open that up, at least the customer would have what they had to begin with, all right? At least they'd have a decent flow of water and some pressure there. All right, here's a point that's worth noting, and pumps will not function if the incoming water pressure is too high. And I'm going to tell you something. That is not an exclusive to our F&W City Booster. That is true with virtually every city water booster pump I've ever seen out there. They'll tell you, man, if that pressure's too high coming in, these pumps aren't going to work. All right, so what do you mean too high? What do you mean too high? Well, if it's too high, they're going to suggest that we put a pressure reducing valve on the inlet side of the pump. Take the pressure back down, lower it back down for the pump to operate. I think we still need to discuss what is too high. What is too high? Well, if it's above 30 psi for a VPO5, if your incoming pressure is above 30 psi and you're putting in a half horse VPO5, you need to reduce it down to 30 psi or below. On that 1 horsepower, I'll get my head out of the way, that's 50 psi, right? That's not a big limitation if you ask me. I mean, I don't know, if somebody's got 50 psi coming into their house, what kind of a candidate are they for this pump? That's not too bad a pressure. Down in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I live, I got 52 pounds of pressure coming out of my kitchen faucet. I don't have a big booster pump or a need for one. So again, if that pressure is above 50, you got to ask yourself, really, is that a big issue? Because that may not even be a candidate to begin with. But if these pressures are higher than those thresholds, 30 for a half horse and 50 for a 1 horse, we need to take it down. We need to reduce it down, and we'll do that with a pressure reducing valve. Then the other thing, and this is a CYA move right here, all right? To ensure that we don't ever over-pressurize someone's system, there's also going to be a recommendation that we put in a pressure release valve somewhere on the discharge side of that pump. All right, a pressure release valve. These things are on every water heater, right? Every water heater has a pressure release valve and a temperature release valve. So having a pressure release valve over here, should something ever happen and the pump over-pressurizes, you got a way of taking that pressure off. And here's another reason to put a pressure release valve in. What happens if a pump, if somebody's pump overpressurized a home and damage occurred? Well, they call the factory. The factory says, hey, that pump just, they say, that pump just overpressurized and it busted some pipes and fittings. You know what my first question is going to be? Did you install a pressure release valve? Because had you, we would not have this conversation, right? So again, there's good reason just to go ahead and put a pressure release valve on the discharge side of that pump. These are things that are all pointed out in the instruction manual. If I go out on 10 installations, 9 of them will not be like this. Just want to point that out. So there are some disadvantages to not installing things quite this way, all right? So, talking about priming this pump, I mentioned a little while ago that this pump is probably the easiest pump of all the pumps that we have here to prime. I mean, this pump primes in seconds. Let's look at what we need to do to prime this pump, all right? We're going to unthread this air release valve. Like I said, you can take it out or you can just loosen it. It doesn't matter. But then what we're going to do is we're going to open up, we're going to close, if you have the bypass, close that, and then we're going to open up the inlet and the outlet valves, right? We're going to open up the inlet and the outlet valves. Slowly, key word, slowly, all right? So once you open this valve up and water starts to come into this pump housing, air that's in the pump housing is going to escape out this port right here at the top, all right? So once water starts to spurt out there, you're primed, all right? Put that air plug back in, or put that release plug back in, you're primed, you're done. I'm going to guess that takes every bit of, what, 30 seconds, if that, to prime this pump. So it's very, very easy to prime. If you got valve right here, right, that makes that much, much easier to slowly, you don't want to just flying in there because you shoot that water right up to the ceiling, but slowly put that water in there until the water starts to come out here, and then you've got that pump all nice and primed, all right? And then once that happens, you can retighten that air plug and you're ready to go. All right, let's talk about, so that was basically the installations. Renee, we getting any questions up to this point so far?
Yeah.
Okay, got a question.
So what would be a use case? Like, could someone use a VFD with this, or is it just its own thing?
Yeah, okay, so the question, and just, do you have a mic back there yet?
We have it just the one, but they can hear me on here.
Okay, they can hear you, okay. So, I don't ever know that there's an application where a variable frequency drive would be used with a city water pressure booster pump, right? Where we see variable frequency drives mainly sold are on conventional water systems where a conventional pressure switch is going to have a 20-pound pressure swing between the time the pump comes on and the time the pump comes off, and a lot of people don't like that. So they'll put a variable frequency drive in to even all that pressure out. Whereas here, yeah, I don't know. I don't think this would be an application at all for a VFD. I may be wrong, but I'm not aware of any installation where that would have been the case.
And what would be the best routine maintenance steps to make sure it works efficiently? Are they pretty good at just running once you got them going? Or?
Yeah, so the question, yeah, you know, I guess how do you know the thing's functioning? And, you know, you don't want to leave the job site with your fingers crossed, right? You want to leave the job site knowing everything's installed right and everything's functioning, performed, got enough air in the tank. So let's look at this performance just for a second, all right? Just look at this performance up here for a second. Now, I tell you, I believe, and this is another opinion, I believe cell phones have made photographers out of all of us, and pretty doggone good ones. And what you're seeing up there on the screen, I ran into I was at a grocery store over the weekend, and not this past weekend, but a few years ago, and I ran into a customer. Actually, this guy was an outside salesman for an irrigation distributor that we have down here in Fort Wayne, and I ran into this guy, and he said, "Hey, Mr. Painter," he said, "this Saturday, just to let you know, this Saturday I've invited a whole bunch of my contractors, my customers, to come over to my house. I'm going to be cooking brats and hot dogs. I'm going to have sodas and beers." He said, "We're going to be doing a live demonstration of your city water pressure booster pump." He said, if you'd like to come out and sit in on that, man, you're more than welcome." Well, shoot, that guy's only 20 minutes away, so I did. I went out there that day. A bunch of contractors out there. This city water pressure booster pump was sitting right outside this guy's back door. He actually had a toggle switch that he put on this so he could flip it on, flip it off, flip it on, flip it off. So I walked outside and I knelt down and I took that first cell phone picture right there before. That was his irrigation system, all right? So that would go around a couple times, and I hollered up. I said, Adam, go ahead and pop that toggle switch up. He did. Boom, that's what happened. The next thing I heard were all these contractors behind me. They go, oh my God, look at that rain curtain, dude. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I never even heard the word rain curtain before. But if you look at that bottom photo, all right, from where the water's coming out the nozzle to all the way to the end, what they're calling is all that water dropping down is what they call that rain curtain. And what essentially happens here is that the first image, what he was doing, he was painting circles. That's all he was doing, was painting circles, right? But with the second image with the booster pump on, that irrigation system was functioning a lot more effectively, so that they were getting a lot better distribution of their irrigation onto that grass.
Got
Okay?
another question here for you.
Okay.
So what happens if my booster pump isn't coming up to pressure as it should be? Does that mean that there's an air leak somewhere, or?
Okay, so I'll tell you what, another question come in. What happens if my booster pump's not coming up to pressure? I'm going to cover a few troubleshooting tips right at the tail end of this presentation, so don't let me forget that question, but I think it might fit better towards the end of this. I want to get through this performance here, and then we'll go into that troubleshooting. All right, so here's a couple of charts, and my head's right in the middle of these things, but that's okay. The one at the top is a VP05, whereas the one larger chart at the bottom is the VP10, the difference between the half and the 1 horsepower. Now let's go to the VP10, all right, just for a second. Let's suppose that the incoming pressure was 30 psi, all right, on a VP10. And this is being used for irrigation because a lot of times that 1 horsepower, that's what it's being used for, irrigation. And you're flowing water, let's say somewhere out there in that 15 to 18 gallon per minute range. So if you look at the chart, you have incoming pressure, inlet pressure, 30 psi. You go over to 15 gallon per minute and you come down, look what your pressure is. It's 70 psi. Even at 18 gallons a minute, it's 65 psi. And even at 21 gallon a minute, you're still almost at 60 psi when you had 30 psi coming in, all right? Now I've had people look at that and they go, man, that's a 70-pound boost, that's a 65-pound. No, that's system pressure. So you take your inlet pressure, add your boost, and therein lies your system pressure. So 30 pounds is our inlet pressure, add the boost. Well, how much is that boost to get to 70 pounds? It's a 40-pound boost, right? 40-pound boost. So that's the explanation on that. I would like you to go up here to that top one now. Let's just go up there. I don't think I've got any animations on that chart, but look, I want you to look at something up there. Go up to that top chart. That's the half horsepower. That's the one I said mostly used for homes. You got 30, let's do the same thing. You got 30 psi coming in, right? 30 psi coming in. How much pressure are you going to have at 15 gallon a minute? Not very much. How much pressure at 18 or 21? None. That pump's not going to provide any water out there at that flow rate. So that's why if you look more back at the 3, 6, 9 gallon a minute range, which is more conducive to what's going to be used in a home, then you get decent pressure boost, right? You can get anywhere from a 50 to 60 pound pressure boost. So again, that's the thing to keep in mind is it's your inlet pressure plus the boost is going to give you what we're showing in that chart as far as what we call system pressure, all right? There's that rain curtain they were talking about. Again, I had no idea what that meant, but you learn something every day. I guess the day you don't's the day they plant you. So anyway, we'll move on now. Protection, all right? I mentioned this a little bit early on, and this might come back to where I don't want to forget that one question that come in, but I want to talk to you a little bit about this protection, all right? This onboard protection that we have. So these are the things that it'll protect against. If you happen to get into a dry run or a rapid cycle, on, off, on, off, on, off, and a lot of times if there's no air in a pressure tank, that's what's going to happen, right? Whether it's a conventional system or this. If there's no air in there, boom, 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 on, off, on, off, on, off. It'll also, what will happen now is if you do get into that situation, that pump's going to shut down. that thermal sensor that's up front that we talked about is going to pick up that heat rise. Again, long before anything detrimental happens to this pump, and it's going to shut that pump down. Now, once it shut the pump down, it'll come on hourly to see if that condition still exists. If it does, it shuts down again. And I think after the second or third time it shuts down, it's going to stay shut down. It's going to stay shut down. But if it comes back on and that condition has no longer there, well, that pump's going to take right off and go again, all right? In the case of a deadhead, now a deadhead again is pumping against a closed valve. There's no water flow. There's no water flow moving, right? So in the case of a deadhead, again, that heat rise, that sensor, it'll shut the pump down. Those are really good pieces of insurance that shuts this pump down, all right? In the case of a deadhead, it'll stay shut down. Once water flow starts, then the pump will come right back up and run again, all right? So it'll come back on once the water flow starts again. On the top of that electronic enclosure is this label, and there's three indicator lights up there, and I want to make sure we all understand what those are telling us, all right? So that first one, that green light, that'll be illuminated at such time that there is power to the pump, all right? When there's power to this pump. So if I were to walk into a job somewhere and I walk up to a booster and I see that the only thing on is that green light, then that just tells me that there's power to the pump. That's all it's telling me. However, if I come and I see that this red light's on, all right? What's that going to tell me? Well, there you go. That red light is going to indicate that there's the pump's been running dry, right? And it got into a heat rise and it's shut down, and that red light is going to be on, along with the green light, because it still has power, but it's in a failure mode. Now, the yellow light, if it's on, and it's a solid yellow light. So, in other words, I walk up to this booster and I see that the green light's on and a solid yellow light's on. What's that tell me? Well, it tells me I got power to the pump and someone's using water somewhere. It could be in a shower, it could be in a dishwasher, it could be out in an irrigation system. Someone's using water somewhere when that yellow light is on, all right? So I can, if I were sitting inside, I could tell when that water was being used or not by just looking at the yellow light. Now that yellow light serves a second function as well. If that yellow light comes on and off intermittently, then that's going to indicate a leak in the system, all right? So we need to go out and discover that leak and get it fixed. But again, you know, this pump's going to protect itself and shut down so that it doesn't just self-destruct, and it's going to give us that extra protection. If you don't want to wait all that time, you don't want to wait an hour, you don't want to wait for this pump to come back on after it's shut down, unplug it. Unplug it, I don't know, count to 10, 15, whatever, and then plug it back in. The instruction manual says that if you unplug it, wait for 5 seconds, plug it back in, it'll reset, all right? So you can reset the pump that way, just by unplugging it and putting it back in. I want to cover these operating conditions very quickly here. As far as ambient temperatures go, 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 104 degrees. I want to talk about removing this pump, and by the way, this is going to be an upcoming sipping ground coffee session. It's going to be, you know, what do I need to do to winterize my pump? I'm going to go into some detail on that. But with this one here, what do we need to do to winterize the pump? Well, unplug it from the power source. You close that inlet and outlet valve if they're right here, right? You can close that off, otherwise you can shut the main off. Take the pressure off the pump, open that bypass valve up. All right, so now we've got the pressure off the pump, and at this point we can release that pressure from here if you want, or you can open a valve up somewhere. And then with the unions there, you can go ahead and disconnect the plumbing from the pump and actually remove that pump. People ask me all the time, they said, Painter, how do I winterize a pump? My first question is, where do you live, man? What do you mean? Are you in Florida? Or are you in northern Indiana? Because we were 15 degrees below zero last winter. I don't know if you get down to you get down to 32 degrees down there, right? That's really, really cold. So winterizing a pump obviously is going to vary from one geographic area to another. And again, I'm going to get into that in another session. But for this one, if you want me to guarantee that this pump will never freeze, I can do that. How? take it out and put it in a heated area, all right? I don't care if it's a heated garage, it's in a basement, whatever. Put that pump somewhere where it's not freezing, and I'll guarantee that it won't freeze. But that's about the only way that you can make that guarantee, all right? So again, these are just some things on the back side of this. I'm down to the last. How are we doing on time?
You're at 30.
That's
minutes.
That's about right then, isn't it? There was a question that came up. Restate that question for me, Renee.
So what happens if my pump isn't coming up to pressure as it should be? What would you think would be the cause for that?
All right, well, question. My pump's not coming up to pressure as it should be. Now, I would want to know what should be is, all right? So again, we looked at that chart. So you look at your incoming pressure and what horsepower pump you've got, and based on what flow rate you're running, that's where your should be pressure should be. And if you're not hitting that, for whatever reason, I don't hear this very often, but if you're not hitting that for any reason at all, my suggestion would be to go inside the pump body and look at those impellers, because there's where that water coming in, it's going to go into the eye of that impeller. That impeller is going to spin at the same rate this motor's turning, and the water coming out of there should be coming out at a very high velocity. Well, if it's not, then that impeller is going to have, it's either plugged or partially plugged with some type of debris, the reformed material, or just iron-laden water kind of grew inside there and just kind of clogged it all up. But that would probably be the reason that I would look for is those impellers. That's where your pressure is going to come from. All right? Any other?
One more question. So how do you handle overcycling? Say a pump turns on and off. Do you leak the air out of it?
Yeah. So how do you handle overcycling or rapid cycling? Okay. Let's go back to just a conventional water system for a moment, all right? These conventional water systems, they all had pressure tanks, whether you had a jet pump or a submersible pump, whatever type of pump you always had some type of a pressure tank, and every one of those pressure tanks has an air charge inside of it. If that tank, including this one, ever loses that air charge, it goes away. There's no air in there at all. That is what we refer to as a waterlogged tank. It's a term that's been around for decades. It's called a waterlogged tank, and it will result in a rapid cycling of the pump. What do you mean? Well, what I mean is that you walk over and you open that kitchen faucet, that pump come on. You shut that faucet off, that pump shut off. You can sit there and turn that pump on and off by opening and closing that faucet. That's not a good thing for the pump. That's not a good thing. That's what's called rapid cycling. And that'll wear out that pump. It'll create that heat rise and everything else that we want to. But this pump has those protections to contend with it. So, all right, anything else going on?
Well, I think that was our last one.
Go to our website. If you go to the website, there's a little hamburger menu up in the top left. Click on that thing. There's all kinds of support literature. You can order this stuff. Get a hold of your salesman. They can do this for you as well. But there's a brochure that talks to the city water pressure booster systems. So it's got the it's got the performance and things on the back side of it. This form number is FW. Oh, good luck, painter. FW. Yeah, good luck. Didn't bring my readers in with me. There's also a training module, all right? Look for that one too. That training module, it's a City Water Booster training module. It'll be listed under our literature category in that website. But that training module is essentially this presentation. It's got all the images along with commentary that goes with the images. So go ahead and grab one of those. Listen, I appreciate y'all being here. Don't forget that code word unions. Email that back into Flint and Walling. Hit that little bell if you like what we're doing. That's all for today, folks. Be talking with you real soon. Thank you very much.